So Carla, we're in the MCC Thrift Centre for New Hamburg, and you're telling me that there's a whole other world through these doors.
Yep. Come on in, I'll show you.
All right.
Carla Richards is the thrift store's recycling manager. And as she explained to me on our tour, it has become more than just a place to find a good bargain.
One thing that I
Past the many racks of clothing and rows of used furniture, there is a recycling haven for the community of New Hamburg.
We have quite an operation in this room, that's for sure. In this room, we're looking at ways that we can use any of the material that's left from our clothing sort. So if there's items of clothing that might be ripped or stained, it's possible that we can turn them into a mat.
So these are things that people have donated to the store that you couldn't necessarily sell.
Exactly.
Operating since 1981, it's projects like this one that the Mennonite Church is proud to be part of. Mainly run by volunteers and a handful of full-time staff, the Mennonite Central Committee's Thrift Centre is a flutter of activity, both in the store and in the back rooms, as they, step by step, reduce their store's carbon footprint and waste, while at the same time come up with innovative ways to generate income for their overseas missions projects.
So next area I'd like to show you is our metal recycling. We have a number of appliances that are donated, or small appliances, or VCRs, or you name it. We always ask the donors at the back door, does the item work? And we always hear yes. Sometimes that's not necessarily the case. So the items are always tested by our volunteers, and the ones that don't work will come over to Donald or some of the other members of his team, and they work hard at dismantling the items and properly recycling things. So they're separating the plastic, taking out the copper, the stainless steel, any of the metal components that can be recycled, and we sort them and take them to a metal recycler locally that then obviously pays us cash for them. So it works really well for the, first of all, for the environment, that things are disposed of properly, and as well our charity receives the proceeds from that.
Even old wood furniture is repurposed here.
Our volunteer Glenn is working on restoring a chair, repairing a chair that was donated and obviously not saleable in the condition that we received it. So he's working to fix it up that we can put it out in the store. This room also has a number of volunteers that work at refinishing wood, stripping wood that has been donated that we can't sell in its original shape. So they'll bring it in, plane down the wood, and build other things from it. We've built things like the drying rack behind you there. We've done garden arbors. We do upholstery of furniture that needs a little help, that we can sell it to the end consumer then.
So nothing is really garbage here. You try your hardest to reuse and recycle everything.
That's right. Extend the life that we can make it usable, and if we can make some money for the charity, that's great. But the ultimate goal is for sure the environment and keeping things out of landfill.
And with hundreds of other MCC thrift stores around the country doing similar projects, including making quilts out of old material, Darren Croft, the Creation Care Program Coordinator for the Mennonite Central Committee, says this is an example of Creation Care at its best.
The Creation Care Program tries to integrate our love for our neighbors with love for creation, so finding ways that we can bring hope and healing to creation and communities that depend on it. So a lot of ways we do that is looking at eliminating waste in the resources that we send overseas, and finding ways to really maximize our use of resources.
Creation Care is nothing new, simply a movement to motivate the church into being smarter stewards of the earth. And it's Croft's job to help the Mennonite Church in Canada get there.
We've actually set a goal across MCC to reduce our carbon emissions by 20% over 10 years. So one of the ways is to look at our cars and make sure they're efficient, to look at our buildings, and then we're also looking at video conferencing, so we can do ways of meeting together and doing our important work, but not always having to travel as well. Gives me a better
energy efficiency has been a mission the MCC has really taken seriously in the past couple years. Even at the Ontario offices in Kitchener, teams of volunteers help the organization stay green.
Volunteers here especially are great at that. And we have been composting as well in the green bin program, and finding ways that we can just make sure that we leave a light footprint on the earth. We have school kits that we send overseas, and in those are pencil crayons, and sometimes we get bigger pencil crayons than what we can give. So in order to repackage those, we need to find a nice container to put them in, and we find that milk bags actually are perfect. So we just open up the top, wash them out, put the pencil crayons in, and then we seal it back up again.
Penciling creation care into all of our vocabularies and lives is a choice all of us can make, says Croft. And while creating a more energy efficient building or church or community can be challenging on top of coming up with ideas of how to reduce waste, it's our responsibility, he says. And it's the Word of God that he points to in sessions at churches to help people understand that.
Well, I think it's pretty clear that God has a great love for creation. One of my favorite texts is Colossians 1, where God talks about, Paul talks about redeeming all of the earth. Both heaven and earth is being redeemed through Jesus. So that gives a sense that God has a very good purpose for this earth and wants to see it flourish. And it's part of our responsibility to make sure that we are partners in that.
But he will admit that while most get on board, there are some who are still skeptical about creation care and the true impact it will have on our world.
Well, one of the hesitations is actually their heart's in the right place. They're just concerned that by putting resources towards environmental issues, that means we can't work towards helping people have their basic needs met. And I mean, that's a great motivation because you care about people. But what we want to help people understand is that these things are integrated. So working at environmental issues does end up helping people overseas and here locally as well.
Hillcrest Mennonite Church in New Hamburg is an example of a local initiative. Recently, they went green. And as Pastor Jen Steckley explains, it was a process they were happy to be part of.
We began working with the Greening Sacred Spaces project, and part of that was to have someone come and do an audit of our building and determine kind of where we could become more green and what kinds of things we could do to make our building more energy efficient, to cut down on the amount of energy we were using. So that's where it started. We started with replacing light bulbs with compact fluorescents, those kinds of things. And then from there, just as awareness was being raised, then the solar project kind of eventually came onto the table as well.
And why make your building, your church building, greener?
Well, this is a community that's always been concerned with kind of caring for the land. In part, this congregation would have been a rural congregation initially, so we've got lots of people who work close to the land, or did. We don't have nearly as many anymore, but so that's kind of part of the DNA of this congregation. And people who have simply, that's been their approach to life, is taking care of the environment and God's creation, and seeing that as part of our faith, faithful response for how we live on the earth.
Another faithful response was installing a solar panel in their front yard. Soon, this church will be off the grid and fully running on solar energy. And while installing solar panels might not be for everyone, Darren Croft says there are little things we all can do to make our lives just a little bit greener.
Well, I think that they can just kind of look at one area that they would be excited about. So look at something like food, and just look at ways that you can maybe eat locally, reduce your food consumption, figure out ways to reduce waste, and find ways that make it joyful. I think it's easy to feel like this is a burden thing, but we can actually gain a lot by living with less.
And as Carla Richards and her team of volunteers at the MCC Thrift Centre has shown, possibilities are endless when thinking of ways to repurpose and recycle. It's all about taking the first green step.
We started a garden project a couple of years ago. Just another way that we can reuse and share and
care for creation.
Care for creation, exactly.
In New Hamburg, Ontario, Magdalene John, 100 Huntley Street.